knows what Streamer University is, by the way, because I was talking to friends and some of them were like, I thought it was just an excuse for top streamers to like fuck about. I spent my weekend watching Streamer University and it was something, but there were some really good takeaways from some of the classes. There was some drama at Streamer University. We're not going to get into that. It's not my thing. Although I will tell you my thoughts on Streamer University at the end of this, because I do have thoughts and I have a rant that I need to get out of my body. But we are going to talk about some of the key takeaways from Ludwig, Agent, Valkyrae, and Cinna's classes. I actually don't know what it is. So Streamer University is something that Kai Cinna set up last year. And basically he picks, I think it's 150, like between 100 and 200 students to come to a university campus and take classes from some of the top streamers in the world and stream the weekend, and they get a bunch of new tech and basically you just go there and you learn. However, it's also kind of a reality TV show. So I think some of the students were picked, it gives like very Big Brother vibes, if you've ever watched that. Yes, there is learning, but there's also a lot of drama. As someone that really would have been there to learn, I think the other students would have really pissed me off. But I'll talk about that at the end. There were a lot of clip farmers, yes. But guess what is one of the tips from our top streamers? It's about clip farming. It's about clip farming. Okay, so I'm gonna start with some crazy stats that Ludwig shared. So if you're a streamer, let's get into it, okay? 92% of streamers only go live once, never go live again. That's wild. On average, 6 million people stream on Twitch every single month, which really explains why if you average 20 viewers, you are in the top 1% of streamers. Oh, this is cool. 50% of your viewership will change year over year. So if you're averaging like 100 viewers right now, say, this same time next year, and you're still averaging 100, 50% of those viewers will be different because people have lives and things change. So even though you might not think that you're growing, quote unquote, you are actually growing just to maintain that average because people come and they go. And I think that's a really good way to look at it as well, because we're so hard on ourselves when it comes to the growth rate of it all. But even just staying statistic or staying the same is growth, honestly. Okay, the StreamerU stats that he shares were kind of crazy. So 87% of the StreamerU participants from last year, basically they never hit their StreamerU peak again. So they hit their peak CCV at StreamerU, and then they never achieved that same thing. 87%. And 10% of StreamerU participants from last year never went live again. Some of the students aren't actually streamers. They're TikTokers or YouTubers or whatever, but they came to like learn about streaming in theory. But 10% of them never went live again. And then the last StreamerU statistic he shared was that on average, the StreamerU participants from last year only gained 4 viewers in a year. So StreamerU really didn't impact them that much. Now, that said, there were a couple that absolutely crushed it because they actually paid attention, which really makes sense if you watch StreamerU and you see some of these classes. People are not paying attention, but that's a rant that I have at the end. It does make sense, but the fact that only like a handful of them actually increased. Some of them did really well though. Like they increased by like 5K viewers as CCV, which is amazing. But those people really focused on relationship building, authenticity, and kindness, which again is what you should do if you're at a professional retreat. So a couple themes that were hammered home this weekend really were be curious. You can always learn at any level, which I think some of the students should have taken more seriously. But Agent had a really good comparison. I like that he compared being a streamer to being an athlete. But he said, basically, if you're not watching your game tapes, you're not getting better. You need to be watching. And in terms of game tapes, for us, it would be content. So if you're not analyzing all the content that you're consuming, then it's akin to basically going and playing the basketball game without practicing, which I thought was a really cool comparison. And it does make a lot of sense because you should constantly be analyzing all the content that you're consuming? Like, what is it about this title, this thumbnail? What is this hook that really gravitates towards me and makes me stay for this entire video? Those sorts of things. Also, pay attention to people outside of your niche and in other languages, because there's a lot of different content that you can pull from that is outside of your bubble. So make sure you're expanding your horizons a lot. Basically, Agent just hammered home, like, don't be too arrogant to learn. You can learn at any stage. Isn't that hard for some people who don't like to watch themselves? Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I think that that's a big thing of learning too. It's not just consuming other content, but it's also watching your content and see how you can improve. So you have to be able to watch your VODs. Talking about the clip farmers, another thing that a lot of the professors hammered home was that clips are not everything. One, you can't be the clip all the time. So if you're putting out a clip of like your peak moment in stream, right? That's like, what, 10 seconds of your entire stream. And so if you're seeing that you're putting out clips and getting like tons of views and it's going viral, but then it's not converting back to viewers, think about the fact that people are going to view the clip and then come to your stream expecting that exact energy. And if you're not giving them that, then they're probably going to peace out, right? So you have to put out clips that are basically being you authentically all the time. It's not going to be just those high moments. If a clip goes viral, that doesn't mean that it was successful. A clip is successful if it generated something. So if you got engagement, viewers, money, etc. If you're just getting 1 million views on a clip but it doesn't translate to anything, then that's not a success. They also talked about how creativity is something that you train. It's basically like a muscle, and you have to keep training it and not neglecting it, which was a cool concept to think about, because I did read a book once where it talked about how creativity and imagination was like its own entity and you had to kind of feed it constantly. And they talked about having a content strategy for your streams. This includes how often you stream, how long you stream, what the content of your stream is. Also, dedicating time to brainstorming your content ideas. This is something that I think a lot of people don't do, but it's something that will like improve your creativity a ton. Agent talked about how he did his brainstorming way of doing things is to do some breath work and to put on some like sounds that really stimulate his brain, like white noise or whatever, and then he'll jump into it, and he'll either walk about his room and talk out the ideas out loud to himself, or he'll call a friend and talk with someone about it. Whatever your process is, it could be completely different, but making sure that you set aside dedicated time to do that brainstorming. Figuring out how to take an idea and package it really well is the job, and it's the hardest part of the job, which both Agent and Ludwig touched on constantly. I mean, Ludwig did a whole class on just YouTube packaging alone, which he says is the one skill that you need to really succeed on YouTube. It's just packaging. And Agent really hammered home a lot of figuring out how you can take a concept and elevate it and really increase the appeal and the stakes of that idea so that it becomes even better as a package. Oh my gosh, this one was big, and I feel like this is something that like a lot of people get stuck on. The grind isn't about streaming more hours. It's about being a content creator. Ludwig likes to believe that between 100 and 150 hours a month is a good benchmark for how often you should stream. If you're streaming more than 150 hours a month, then you're not using your time effectively, because you should be working on other things, which then Agent touched on, talking about how you should split your time if you're under a certain threshold. I think he said 250,000 followers. You should be putting 40% of your time to streaming, and 60% of it should go to making short form content or making long form content if you're able to. So making sure that there's that sort of balance, and that the grind is not constantly streaming, because it's not going to be the most effective use of your time. And then the last theme that they really touched on was that luck is a part of the journey. Every single streamer touched on this, and basically just getting lucky was part of the path for them to get to where they are. And there are definitely ways that you can increase your luck, which they did cover in terms of being consistent, putting in effort, checking your analytics, posting everywhere and knowing your audience. I really like the quote that is just, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. As long as you're prepared to take on the opportunity when it comes, that's like the important part of it. Now we go from themes to practical advice, right? So YouTube was a huge talking point of the weekend. Ludwig did a whole class on how you can package your YouTube videos, which he says is the one skill that you need to succeed in YouTube. So growing on YouTube is easier. 2.6 billion people watch YouTube every single month versus 240 million on Twitch, right? It's also the most watched TV channel as well. But Ludwig got into a lot of specific advice on how to crush it at YouTube. So getting the right thumbnail is huge. And he talked about a trick that his friend uses, which is blurring the image so that it mimics scrolling really fast. And then that can help you if you're between two thumbnails, figure out which one is the best one to pick. A side note, during this conversation, one of my favorite things about StreamerU was watching Ludwig shut down people that were just being rude or being disrespectful or being an idiot. It was so satisfying. During this conversation about thumbnails, I think it was Jason raised his hand and asked, what do you think about AI thumbnails? Ludwig just deadpan was like, I think they'll be rejected by the viewers. So what is your goal? Do you want views on your videos or not? And then the entire class was like, views on your videos. And then he goes, okay, so you can use AI thumbnails if you want to save money and get no views, but that's up to you. And then he just went on talking. And then he just continued his class. He also talked about the 4 Ps. So these are the core components, he says, of a YouTube intro. So premise, what you're going to talk about, the problem, what are the stakes for the viewers that are watching, the plug, which is the call to action. You don't always need to be doing this, but if it fits in naturally with the setup, you know, like come subscribe or check out the new merch or whatever. And then the payoff. So the problem that you set up, essentially, and paying that off. And basically YouTube, he also talked about how YouTube is a game where people take from people. You're constantly being inspired by other artists, and the playbook is basically already written. So don't make it harder on yourself, essentially. Don't steal it bar for bar, video frame for video frame. That's not cool. But if you're inspired by someone, it's just a constant, that's a part of the platform. Outside of YouTube, they also dove deep into the creative process, collabs, and how to build a team. So you know that feeling you get right before Christmas? Everybody knows that feeling, right? Like you're hyped and something really good is coming and you're like anticipating it. Ludwig says that you should constantly be making yourself Christmases so that you can deal with the monotonous like day-to-day tasks because your Christmas is coming. So whether that is a giant collab, a giant event, special type of stream that you're doing, whatever it may be, make sure that you're building in Christmases for yourself so that there's something that you constantly have to look forward to, and also something that your viewers can constantly look forward to. I gotta find and watch some of these videos. They were genuinely really, really good. If something works, do it again, and do it again until it stops working. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Work smarter, not harder. Agent says that there's a video that constantly works for him. He reposts that every 3 months because it works. So keep doing it. Keep doing your tried and true content until it doesn't work anymore, and then pivot. My Christmas is your streams. I found it really interesting what you said about taking inspiration from what people from other countries do and who speak different languages. I thought that was a really cool takeaway from Agent too. Like he constantly was looking outside of his bubble, and he talked about like there's this massive event that this French streamer does because he really loves racing and like F1 and NASCAR and that. And there's a French streamer that does a massive event with a whole bunch of streamers in Europe, and he basically brings them all to a racetrack and they all learn how to race and then they do it. And like nobody in the class had heard of that, but he had, because he went outside of his bubble to find something else that he really loved. So I think it's really, really cool to take inspiration from what other people are doing in the world. Ludwig also talked about what matters during a collab. Having fun is top. He said literally nothing else matters. Having fun is the best thing, because if you're having fun, you're going to want to repeat it. Your audience is having fun, and there is a high chance that you will do that collab again, right? And then second would be make it easy on your collaborator. If you go to someone and you're like, hey, want to do a collab? That's the whole message. that does not make it easy on them. There's a lot of questions there. Okay, when? What are we doing? Like, what game are we playing? Versus if you go to someone with a plan and you go, okay, like, here's the date, here's the time I'm looking for, here's the exact game that we'll play, here's how long it will take us, and this is exactly what I need from you. That's a much easier approach, and it's a much easier way to get somebody to say yes. Ludwig says that he collabs with streamers all the time, but you have to actually lay it out properly for him to make it easy for him to say yes, because he's a busy guy. And then the last thing would be hype. So the last thing is, did you get the views, right? Like, did your audience cross each other? Did you learn something new? That sort of thing. But I thought that having fun was a really something, again, that people don't think about. They're so in their head about the numbers and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, but if you're not having fun, what's the point? Something that Cinna and Agent both hammered home was that streaming is about getting out of your comfort zone, and that you will be your most successful if you get out of your comfort zone and try new things and meet new people. Because if you're constantly in your comfort zone, you're never going to grow. Everybody falls off. So don't attach yourself or your self-worth to the numbers. That's something that you cannot control. And just know that everybody falls off at some point. Everybody will. So something else that Agent talked about was how streaming is mental first. So take care of your mental. Make sure that you have a support system and let your passion guide you. If you're not passionate about this, if you're not constantly learning and constantly wanting to improve and enjoying yourself, then it will be something that you eventually quit, because this is a hard industry and it's a hard job, and you have to be able to mentally overcome that. Valkyrae went over saying no when a brand is being predatory. She talked a lot about building up your team and how to find good employees, how to find a good agency. So if you're at that point in your streaming career, I really suggest watching her class. I don't know if she actually posted it, but I did find it through Ludwig. So that was, if you're at that point, definitely go watch it. But she did talk about saying no, even if it's your dream brand. If they're being predatory and they are exploiting you, say no. Because one, it helps the rest of us in the industry. When people are constantly taking these low offers, it keeps all of those offers low for everybody. But also it's just a good way to protect yourself. And the likelihood is if they want to work for you and they're pitching to you, they're going to come back to you. Whether it's then or in a couple months with a better offer, they will come back. Ray also talked about getting started with an agency and how you should never commit to someone off the bat, but rather date them for at least 3 months. So do a 3-month trial period, whether you're going with an agency or a new editor or a publicist or whatever it is. Make sure that you are doing some sort of probationary period with them before signing anything official. I would say that also applies to the mod team, testing them out. That's a good point too. That's a good point too. We have been doing that too with probationary periods, and I think that it's a good way to see if somebody is a good fit for the team. Ooh, these stats were cool. Okay, so before getting into Ludwig's tips and tricks, basically, let's jump into some streamer case studies. The thing that everybody wants to know, how much money are people making? Is there a good place to get information on standard fees that you could charge a brand based on your You know what, Carlos? No. Technically, there are studies and stuff that you can look up in terms of how much you should charge a brand, but it really varies. It really, really varies. It also depends on the person that you're actually negotiating with. And it's something that I think that you learn just with time and with the more that you continue in this industry. So Ludwig did a bunch of case studies. He talked about the top one of the top 100 streamers in the world, that being himself. He's number 95. He talked about one of the top 1,000th streamers, and then a streamer in the top 10,000. And he showed some pretty cool stats. So basically, he used himself as the case study for the top 100. He makes over $1 million a month. That is before expenses, though. His expenses for the month of June, which was his example, were around 350,000, right? And this is only if you diversify. So he makes a lot off of YouTube, a lot off of sponsorships. He has multiple forms of income, because realistically, if you could see, he only made 57,000 on Twitch, and he is like the 95th streamer in the world out of 6 million people going live every single month. So perspective, right? Then he talked about the top 1,000th. So this is the top 1000s. He actually spoke to someone, so all of this data is real, right? So she is a gamer. She averages 1,200 viewers. She streams about 130 hours a month, right? And her sub count is about 1,600. She is making this much, right? So sponsorship, she has 0 deals. He said that her reasoning for that was that her agency sucked. She got no sponsorships for the month of June. Her YouTube, she only posts shorts, so it's 150. And then her Twitch is bringing in about 10,000 a month. So she's making just over 10,000 a month, and that is one of the top streamers in the top 1,000. And finally, he talked about someone in the top 10,000. So this guy is a variety streamer. He averages 150 viewers. He streams about 180 hours a month. His sub count is 375, and he's been active for about 6 years. So what does that translate into? This person made 700 in the month of June on sponsorships. They got a sponsorship. Slay, love to see it. And then on Twitch, they're making about 3,000. So between 3 to 4,000 a month. And that is one of the top 10,000th. So if you're basically, if you're averaging 150 viewers, that is not a small streamer. That is one of the top out of 10,000 out of 6 million, right? So I thought it was really cool to see the perspective on this, because I think that a lot of people have skewed perspective because of other social media sites, right? And they're like, oh, 150 viewers compared to, like, 25,000 followers on Instagram or something. Twitch viewer is going to give you more ROI. So having 150 CCV is a top streamer. I remember when I thought 100 viewers was a smaller streamer, how wrong I was, right? It's really cool to see the perspective. And then he was talking about how you have to be passionate about this, because if you only reach, a certain threshold, are you going to be happy with that in your day-to-day life, right? Because the average if you make it into the top 10,000, you're making on average the same as somebody that works a 9 to 5, right? Like you're making like 40, 50,000 a year. So it's really, really cool to see the different statistics there. It's interesting how Twitch earnings kind of plateau after a certain ranking, and how YouTube sponsorships really take off after that. 100%. Exactly. And I think that the sponsorships on the YouTube are really, that's what Ludwig kind of hammered home. He was like, why do you want to be a streamer? Because if you want to be a streamer to get rich or to get famous, that's not the most efficient way to do either of those things. There are better ways to do it. You could be a real estate mogul. You could be a YouTuber. So you really have to think about your why, and then work it into the context of what your goals are. It's also interesting how much work it takes to create that consistency for viewers. I never thought about that. It's a lot of effort. I think it was Ludwig's day 1 talk. He asked the question, is being a streamer as hard as a 9 to 5 job? And there's definitely 100% nuance to that conversation. But I think that something that people don't consider when you are a streamer or a YouTuber or anything that involves content creation is that you are a small business owner. You're not only, if you want to take it to that level, if you want to be a business and have it sustain your bills and stuff, right? You're not just hitting live and that's it. You're consistently outputting content across multiple platforms. You're editing, you're marketing, you're doing the business side of it, right? Like it is a small business. So I think that is a better comparison than just saying like 9 to 5 versus streamer, right? But again, that's depending on your motivation. If you want to do this as a hobby to make friends, amazing. There's no right or wrong. It's just if that is the way that you're going and if that's your goals. Okay, so finally, let's get into Ludwig's 7 tips and tricks for getting big fast. This is a lightning round, people, so let's go through them. Write down your goals for the year. There is scientific study to back up the fact that if you write down your goals, you're more likely to achieve them. So writing down your goals, knowing what your focus is. And also there is also studies that suggest that people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years. So make yourself the goals for the year, but also make yourself a goal for 5 years. Make a schedule and stick to it. Consistency. Ideate on stream ideas every single day. Brainstorm. Analyze content. Implement the content funnel so you can maximize your efficiency. Make sure that you're working smarter, not harder. Master YouTube by working on packaging. And that is titles, thumbnails, intros, figuring out how to package your ideas so that more people are going to see it, right? Because that is like 60% of the success of your video. And finally, scaling your team so you can output more videos and content faster. But the final tip that he ended with, which I thought was interesting, was now ignore everything that we just told you. He said you don't have to follow the playbook beat by beat. Right? Think critically for yourself. Something that applies to a massive streamer like Ludwig isn't necessarily going to apply to a smaller streamer. So they can give you all this advice and all of these tips, but it isn't necessarily going to translate. So just make sure that you're taking it with a grain of salt, thinking about how it applies to your own content, and then go through the list and pick and choose what you're taking from the learnings. I love the professors that took it seriously. I think that there were some really great takeaways from Ludwig, Valkyrae, Agent's classes. Some of Cinna's were hard to get through because the sheer amount of chaos happening was hard. It absolutely drove me up a wall how some of these students just threw this opportunity away. And maybe that's the type A, like, eldest daughter in me, but there were people getting expelled, skipping class, coming late to class, not doing the homework. Okay, even if you don't want to learn and you want to mess about, at the end of the day, do you know how to make a good impression on these people? You have the chance to potentially form a great relationship with someone like Valkyrae or Ludwig or Agent or whatever. And you're just gonna like be rude and disrespect them in the hallway and then not show up to their class. Like, there literally on I think it was the second or third day, there was 6 people in Ray's class. Like, I mean, it would have been great for me. I would have been one of those people front row. We all would have gotten to know each other really well. But like, 6, I can't fathom it. Like, it was so infuriating to see people just throw this opportunity away. I think some people think they'll get more views from trying to be funny. I think that they think it's just clip farming, which is fair, but that's not going to translate into long-term success. Because if you're constantly crossing the line and being rude to people, like, nobody's going to want to work with you. It was, I couldn't understand how people didn't want to show up to the classes. Like, half of them, when you watch the VOD, the class is like half empty. And it was just bonkers. There was one point where some guys were going to come in to try to disrupt Valkyrae's class, and Ludwig actually stood at the door and he was like, no, you're not going in there. Like, and he kicked them out. Like, and I think that goes back to their point of clips aren't everything. It's, yeah, you can get 1 million views for 10 seconds, 30 seconds. What the hell is that going to do for you long term in terms of showcasing how you can work professionally with brands or getting collabs with bigger creators or any of this stuff? Like, you're a moment in time. Just wild to me. And again, the statistics back it up. 87% of StreamerU, right? Like, and then you think about the fact that 87% of them didn't go on to increase anything after this, and it makes sense because more than half of them are not taking this opportunity seriously at all. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on StreamerU. I'm assuming if you're here, you love to learn as well. So let me know what professor you would love to take a class on. I really was bummed that Pokimane had to cancel. I adore her. I think she is the coolest and the kindest, and getting the chance to learn from her would be incredible. Ultimately, if I was asked to go to StreamerU, if I did apply, of course I would go. You'd be crazy not to go. I do think the other students would, like, drive me up a wall. And I have a face that, like, does not hide what I'm feeling, but the opportunity to make a good impression on those people would be absolutely worth it. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.